Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulihil Kareem. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi alladhi arsala rasulahu bil huda wa dinil haqq liyuzhirahu ala ad-dini kulli wallahu karihal mushrikun. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abdahu wa rasuluhu. Amma ba'd. Ya ayyuhal hadirin, ittaqullah, ittaqullah, ittaqullah. Inna Allah ma'al muttaqin. Qala Allah ta'ala fil Qur'an al-Majid, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat lin-nas ta'maluna bil ma'ruf wa tanhauna 'anil munkar wa tu'minuna billah. History is infinitely elastic. It bends to the will of man. In the recited ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala offers a challenge to the ummah. That this ummah has been evolved, brought forth from mankind. For what? To enjoin that which is good, to forbid that which is evil, and to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ was the embodiment of the Quran. When Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha was asked to say something about the Prophet, she said he was the embodiment of the Quran. As long as he was alive, he was the moon that everyone turned to for guidance. He brought forth in his life that which is manifest in the Quran and that which is hidden in the Quran. After the passing away of Prophet ﷺ, the Islamic community has struggled for 1400 years to realize the diktats of the Quran, the example of the Prophet ﷺ, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, following the example of the Sahaba, the Tabi'in, and the Tabi'in. Inshallah, this khutbah is a brief recollection of the historical struggles of the Islamic community of the last 1400 years, because history is a guide. It is a lamp. If we wish to learn from it, it provides us guidance. And there are multiple ways of examining this history. One way is to look at the archetypes that have appeared over the last 1400 years. The archetypes that symbolize, that in their personality personify what it is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants this community to do. There are at least 7 milestones, major milestones in Islamic history that one can go back and look at and derive some benefit from, and think about the archetypes that personified that age. The first age was immediately after the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet gave as he would to each of the Sahaba according to his capability. To Hazrat Abu Bakr, he gave Sadaqah, Siddiq. He was the truthful one. To Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, he gave justice. To Hazrat Usman radiallahu anhu, he gave haya, a word that does not have a commensurate word in the English language. Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, he called the doorway to my knowledge. Knowledge. Then after the period of the Sahaba, there's the period of the Tabi'een, and then the Tabi'een, and for approximately 7 generations, we can call that the age of faith. What the Prophet ﷺ had taught the Sahaba, and from them on to the Tabi'een, and then on to the Tabi'een, approximately for 7 generations, it carried the Muslims through. For instance, the Prophet ﷺ said, my ummah will not collectively make an error. Very profound statement, which is the basis of Sunnah. When we say it's the school of Sunnah, or we are Sunnah, it means we are following the diktat of the Prophet ﷺ, that collectively the Ummah, the Prophet ﷺ, will not make an error. And if we ask ourselves to think about a person, of course, every one of the Sahaba was by himself a star, who derived his light from the sun, which was the reflection of the barakah of the Prophet ﷺ. Each one of the Sahaba was like a star in the heavens. But for the sake of illustration, if there is one person that we can think of who personified in himself what the Prophet ﷺ has shared with the Sahaba, had taught the Sahaba, it would be Hazrat Umar Farooq radiallahu anhu. Historians have said that Hazrat Umar Farooq was one of the greatest men who ever lived. And of course, even when you ask the non-Muslims, they will agree that the greatest man who ever lived was our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then amongst the Sahaba, the one that they rate very highly is Hazrat Umar Farooq radiallahu anhu. No matter which way you look at him, as a diamond, looking at it in multiple angles, he shines forth like no other diamond. He was one of the greatest conquerors the world has ever seen. His conquests were comparable to those of Alexander. He was a great administrator in the far-flung domains of Islam, extending all the way from Afghanistan to Tripoli, Libya. He created a common market wherein people could travel without fear, taking their goods so that trade would flourish. He encouraged agriculture, digging up the canals that had been in ruin since the time of the Romans. Not only that, he was a man of wisdom, a man who was open to inputs from the other civilizations that had come under the domain of Islam. For instance, when it was found out that what the Arabs had brought in from the Persian Empire had to be recorded, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, he asked around the Sahaba. He created a council of shura to consult with people so that it was a democratic process, consulted with the other Sahaba, and he said, we have to create a department of documentation. And this department of documentation recorded everything that had been brought in. And when he realized that there were not enough katibs, those who could write amongst the Arabs, he hired Persians, open to other civilizations. He had conquered Persia. He could easily have done other things with the Persians, but no. He treated them with dignity. He hired them as katibs to document. And this tradition of documentation persisted in all of the Muslim dynasties, all the way through the Ottomans down to our own times. He was open to technology. He had heard that the Persians had windmills. Wind energy had been harnessed in Persia. So he commissioned people to install similar windmills in Medina and in the Islamic Empire. so that the wind energy harness could be used to grind grain and carry water from the canals onto the fields. He created an education department. Trained teachers were dispatched to places as far away as Samarkand and Bukhara. In other words, he was a man of the hour. He was, in a true sense, the founder of Islamic civilization. When there was a legal issue, the edicts, recall at that time, the science of fiqh had not yet been recorded. So when there was a legal issue, he would try to create an ijma, the consensus of the Sahaba. And most of the edicts that were taken at the time of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu were given to Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu. So much so that later, 100 years later, that became the basis of the Maliki fiqh. If you want to understand Maliki fiqh, you must understand the period of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu. So here was a great man who was an embodiment of what the Prophet had taught him. A man people could look up to. An archetype of the age of faith. Let's look at another person. That other person was Umar bin Abdul Aziz. What happened was, after the first 4 Khilafah, there were disagreements, understandable. And for 50 years, 60 years or so, the Islamic community was trying to found an anchor. It is not commonly known, for instance, that the Arabs did not impose the religion of Islam on those who they had conquered. The Persians did not become Muslim at the time of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu. The Egyptians, the Coptics, did not become Muslim at the time of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu. It was at the time of Umar bin Abdul Aziz radiallahu anhu that the people of Persia and the people of Egypt accepted Islam. Why? Because Umar bin Abdul Aziz was a man of justice. He became the Khalifa in the year 719 because the previous Khalifa was told when he lay on his dying bed that if he were to appoint someone else besides his own son as the Khalifa, then perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive him for his sins. So Umar bin Abdul Aziz became a Khalifa by an accident of history. He was a very dashing young man. He had been a governor of Egypt and for a while in Syria, and he was known as an outgoing young man. But when he became the Khalifa, he gave up his old ways and became one of the most pious people in Islamic history. For instance, he opened up the gates to a dialogue. He conversed with the Zoroastrians. He conversed with the Coptic Egyptians. He reduced their taxes. He made sure that the people of Persia and Egypt did not pay any more taxes than the people of Makkah and Medina. It was the impression that he gave. Impressed with his justice, the people of Persia and the people of Egypt accepted Islam. And as we know, even to this day, when we think of the Islamic core, besides Arabia, we think of Persia, we think of Egypt. That's how they became Muslim, because he was a man of justice, an embodiment of the age of faith. Every age has produced a person like that who people could look up to. Then the age changes. For a while there, what they had learned from the Prophet ﷺ had to be consolidated. 100 years later, for instance, in Kufa, which is in southern Iraq, people from as far away as India and Turkestan would come in and accept Islam. Kufa was a melting pot, like New York today is a melting pot. And there in the land of Kufa was a great man, a great mujtahideen, Imam Abu Hanifa. If there is one man that today the Muslims could imbibe, could look up to as an archetype, as a role model, it would be Imam Abu Hanifa. What happened was, these people would come in, the Hindus, the Zoroastrians, the Jews, and the Christians, and they would ask questions. Questions related to Islam. How do you behave as a Muslim in a paradigm when there were no written rules? And Imam Abu Hanifa rose to the challenge. Think about the life of Imam Abu Hanifa. He was by inheritance a very rich man. His grandfather was a very successful silk merchant trading in Chinese silk in Kufa. He could easily have stayed that way. Imam Abu Hanifa was rich by inheritance. Then when he learned the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet and the Hadith, and he studied the feet of the greatest scholars of the age, he became a scholar himself. And then he started to give edicts. How? Not the way we do edicts today. He would create two groups of people. Whenever there was an issue, he would take his students and divide them into two groups, one opposed to a point of view and the other one for the point of view. And until there was a consensus amongst his disciples, he would not give an edict. The dialectic method was invented by Imam Abu Hanifa. Imam Abu Hanifa was a technologist, a town planner. I have shared with you in the past how it was that it was he who was the planner for the great city of Baghdad. Baghdad did not exist up until the time of Hazrat Imam Abu Hanifa. He had a sense of humor. He did not write down anything, but he asked his disciples to document the edicts that came up. And it was he who had the wisdom to declare that a converted Turk is the equal in Iman to the most pious person in Mecca and Medina. Think about it, its application in our day and age. Because the Turks those days were from northern Mongolia. People don't know this. The Turks are a Mongoloid people. Their language is Mongoloid. And when they accepted Islam, sometimes they would behave in a way that you see these days when Muslims come into the fold of Islam, they don't quite know. And they're often turned away by the way they're treated. He had the courage to say that the Iman of a converted Turk has the same validity, is equal to the Iman of the best Muslim in Mecca and Medina. Such was the greatness of the Mujtahideen, the openness. He opened his arms to everyone. Anyone who wanted to understand what Islam was would go to him, whether it was a Hindu or a Zoroastrian or a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim. He treated them equally. A man of the hour. Then for a while, Islamic civilization experimented with rationalism. This is an issue that would be of interest to all of us in here, because very often we hear comments such as, we have to rationalize Islam. Islamic civilization experimented with it for almost 100 years, from the time of Khalifa al-Mamun to the time of Khalifa al-Mutawakkil, for 105 years. In this process of experimentation, they made the same kind of errors that people make today. They, the so-called Mutazilis, they were the rationalists. They did not understand the limitations of reason. Just as today you find people, they do not understand the limitations of reason. Very often they take positions in contradiction to the teachings of the Quran, in contradictions to the spirit of the Quran, in contradiction to the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ. Reason is a great faculty. The mind is one of the greatest creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it has limits. It's important to understand the limits of reason. What is the basis of rationalism? What does time mean? What does it mean to say that something is logical. One must understand that, so that when one takes a position, one does it with a cognizance of the limitations of reason. These people fell flat on the face, the Mu'tazilites, because they went so far as to try to conjecture on the interface between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Word, namely the interface between Allah and His Word, the Quran. And they said the Quran was created. Na'udhu billah. There are so many people today who also take similar positions when they come back to us and they say, for instance, certain ayahs of the Quran are mansukh. May Allah guide them. They don't know what they're talking about. They're opening the door to great fitna. Every word of the Quran was given to our Prophet ﷺ as an integrated whole. You take one word away, it's as if you take a necklace and you cut the thread. It is not the same anymore. Reason is a noble faculty, but it must be applied with wisdom, understanding the limitations of reason. These people, they experimented for 100 years, then ultimately it was repudiated, and Islam went on to the next age, the age of wisdom. This was the age in which Islamic civilization integrated the knowledge from the East and the West. This was the time when Islamic civilization created the great scientists that we celebrate. For instance, just by way of mentioning Imam Razi. Imam Razi radiallahu anhu was a great Imam. He has studied the Quran. He has studied the Sunnah of the Prophet and the Hadith. Then he went on to study medicine. Did you know that he was the father of ophthalmology? Did you know that he was the father of pediatrics? Did you know that he was the father of surgery? Did you know that he was the one who identified smallpox? Did you know that he was the one who identified measles? A great human being. And his clinic was open to the poor as well as the rich. Nobody who came to his clinic, he dispensed of what he had learned. And he's called by the Europeans the master of masters, the doctor of doctors. This was the pinnacle of the wisdom, the age of wisdom produced by Islam. And it came about as a result of people imbibing, inculcating the teachings of the Quran and the teachings of our Prophet ﷺ. Such was the beauty of the age. Are we willing to follow it today? For instance, openness to other ideas. The numerals, for instance. These days, so many people, when they see an idea come from another civilization, they recoil. Oh, this is not Islamic. No. The Prophet ﷺ said, go to China if you have to learn. And there are multiple meanings in there. It's an ocean of knowledge in there. I'm not going to go into it. One of the obvious meanings is that does not matter where knowledge comes from. It is light. It is knowledge. Inculcated, adopted, learned from it. Another example, Al-Khwarizmi. So many of us in here are computer scientists. Every time you write an algorithm, did you know you're paying tribute to Al-Khwarizmi? He was the father of algebra. He was the father of quadratic equations. Indeed, the man was so open, he even worked on the Jewish calendar. The Jewish calendar came about as a result of the work of Al-Khwarizmi. And Ibn Maimonides is called in the Jewish traditions, 200 years later, worked on and absorbed the ideas of Al-Khwarizmi and developed it. Such was the openness of these geniuses. Such was the openness of the people who were the archetypes of the age. Then this age of wisdom was interrupted by two cataclysmic events that happened at the same time. One was the invasion from the West, and the other was the invasion from the East. The invasion from the West was the Crusades. People know a great deal about it, but only people in the eastern part of the Islamic world know about the invasions from the East, the Genghis Khan, that devastated the Islamic world from A to Z. They devastated all the lands from Amu Darya, that is Samarkand, Bukhara, to Baghdad and beyond, even up to the areas that are in the Galilee, in Palestine today. That entire area was wiped out. So the age of wisdom came to an end. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wisdom, He had prepared the Muslims for just this cataclysmic event. The awliya Allah, emerging from the teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, came to the rescue of the Muslims in the hour of need. This is the 13th century now. Great men such as Sayyidina Abdul Qadir Jilani, Ibn al-Arabi, Mawlana Rumi, they were the products of the age. They laid the foundation of a spiritual civilization which ultimately not only preserved the spirituality of Islam, they converted the conquerors. The Mongols themselves became the standard bearers of Islam. What was it that impelled these people to become the lamps, the guides, that even the conquerors, those who had destroyed Islamic civilization from one end to the other, would accept and become the standard bearers? It was the teachings of the Quran. Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas ta'mununa bil ma'ruf wa tanhauna 'anil munkar wa tu'minuna billah. Again and again throughout Islamic history, we see that it was this civilization which, after a little turbulence, about 200 years, produced the great dynasties which we know about, among the Mughals of India, the Safavids of Iran, and the Ottomans of Turkey and the Middle East. This period was a great period. It was great for its architecture. It produced the likes of Taj Mahal and the Blue Mosque and the Registan, which is in Samarkand and Bukhara. It was the period that produced great literature, great art, great artists, great poets. People cringe these days when you mention the word poetry, but Hazrat Umar Farooq radiallahu anhu was himself a great poet. The Sahaba were all great poets, great orators. The Arabs were very proud of their literary heritage. They were great communicators. This period of the awliya Allah flourished for almost 400 years, 500 years, until it was supplanted by the West. Why? Because Islamic civilization veered from the middle path to the extreme. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that He does not love those who are extremists. Inna Allah la yuhibbul mu'tadin. Allah does not like extremism, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created the universe with balance. وَالسَّمَاءَ عَرَفَهَا وَدَعَ الْمِيزَانَ أَلَّا تَتَغَوْا فِي الْمِيزَانِ. He has created the universe with balance and justice so that you do not violate the balance and justice in your own lives. If you study Islamic history in some depth, you'll find for some reason inexplicable Islamic civilization, starting with the year 1659, moving to the right, and still in some ways is moving to the right. So in this convulsive period, outsiders come in and supplant the civilization of Islam. And then comes the period of resistance and reformation, and that period still continues to this day. Reformation, people asking themselves, what went wrong? Why did we fall behind? What do we need to do to catch up? What do we need to do to find our feet on the ground? Those questions are still valid today as they were at that time. And people have gone through multiple phases of it. And we can talk about the archetypes of the 19th century, or the archetypes of the 20th century. People like Muhammad Abduh of Egypt, or Allama Iqbal of Pakistan and India. We can discuss that. But that period of convulsions continues to this day. Indeed, this age is a convulsive period that includes elements from all of the previous 7 periods. At the same time, we have the age of faith. We have the age of rationalism. We have the age of wisdom. We have the age of awliya Allah and spirituality. We have the age of great traditions, and at the same time, the banality, the commonplace. We have the age of reformation. We have the age of renewal. All of these acting at the same time as if in a cauldron presents the challenge to our children, to you, to me, in this day and age, so that now, as the Ummah of our Prophet ﷺ, we have to face afresh the challenge of the diktat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas ta'muruna bil ma'ruf wa tanhauna 'anil munkar wa tu'minuna billah. This is the challenge that we face because we have inherited the historical legacy of the struggles of the last 1400 years. And it's important, especially for our young men and women, to understand where we have been, because history is a guide. Those who do not understand history are condemned to repeat the errors of the past. We must know our history. It's important to know not just what happened, not just in terms of campaigns and so on, but in terms of ideas. How did we move from the guidance of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, the guidance of the Sahaba and the Tabi'in and the Tabi'in, and those who followed them, the people of wisdom, the great scientists, the awliya Allah. What kind of traits did they leave behind so that we can learn from them and chart out our own course. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم. Brothers and sisters, we live in challenging times. We live in times that try the destinies of people. History is like an arc. It bends to the will of man, and it bends in the direction of justice. Here in America, the Islamic community is faced with ideational challenges in addition to all the other types of challenges. We need to first of all understand our history, where we have been, so that we can perhaps chart out our course. Here in America, we are governed by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And within it, we have the guidance from the Quran, the guidance from our Prophet ﷺ. This guidance shows us the way. There is a way. We can learn from our history and chart our path for the future. First, there is faith. Where there is no faith, there is no civilization. Civilization is built upon, if you study history, only three things: faith, contract, and community. Faith, contract, and community. Where there is no faith, there is no civilization. American civilization is based upon contract, a handshake. Very important. And contract is so important in Quranic teachings too. Faith is the centrality of our existence. This is something personal. The Constitution gives us that latitude, that freedom to believe as we do. And we must believe in the Quran. We must believe in the teachings of our Prophet ﷺ. We must be true mu'mins. Faith, that's our anchor. The second part of our existence in here has to do with knowledge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has offered us so many signs. The science in nature, the science within ourselves, the science in history. Read the Quran. You see the lessons from history. What happened to the people of Ad? What happened to the people of Noah? What happened to the people of Moses? What happened to Pharaoh? What happened to the people of Jesus? Let's learn from it. Offers lessons there. The Quran offers lessons from nature, time and again. Every atom has something to teach us. Those who looked into it, the atom opened its door and they have moved forward. Every molecule of water has something to teach us. The clouds have something to teach us. The leaf has something to teach us. Birds, the heavens. It's a marvelous world. Exciting world. And there are signs in each one of us. As I've shared with you, no person in here is not unique. Every person is unique. At no time from the time of Adam till the day of judgment, will there be another person like you? That's how beautiful you are. That's how great you are. The signs, we must look within ourselves, understand ourselves. Man arafa nafsahu faqad arafa rabbahu. That's the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. He who knows himself knows Allah, knows God, knows his creator. So the second one is knowledge. Cultivate knowledge. Excel in knowledge. The third one is justice. Inna Allah ya'muru bil adli wal ihsan. You see, this was inserted in the khutbahs at the time of Hazrat Umar bin Abdul Aziz in the year 719 because of historical reasons. Allah commands justice, and justice is indivisible. We must take a stand for ourselves and for other people because, for instance, if the Muslims are marginalized in America, it would not take that long for the same forces to marginalize the others. Justice is indivisible. We must work with others to ensure that justice is universal for every human being. And the last one, ihsan, a word that cannot be translated because you do not find it in the English language. Summarily, it means excellence, it means beauty, it means good deeds, it means smiling, it means doing something good. It means worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It means, in the ultimate analysis, serving Him, which means serving humankind, serving the existence that Allah has bestowed upon us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to build an Islamic life here based upon the teachings of the Quran and the Sunnah of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let us pray. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا. ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا. ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به. واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. صلاة والسلام على رسول الله.